Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is Chapter 2 in the story entitled The Return to Taylor, Mississippi. Without further ado, let's get straight into that. My request was met with mixed responses, many of the locals shaking their heads and talking amongst one another. I did, however, gain the trust and help of a select few. Some were truckers, whilst most were farmers, but all had one thing in common. Each one had either lost somebody or been chased or attacked by the Dogman. Even a few were forced from their properties by the Sasquatch or the Dogman. It was clear this really had been going on for a long time. The police didn't offer any real support, as they would mysteriously lose any statements or connecting evidence. Regularly, they would arrive just as the beasts moved on. One man in particular was of more use than most, a young family man and a park ranger named Dean Lewis. Dean was reluctant at first, but stayed to speak with me after some encouragement from his friends. It later was told to me that Dean had lost his kid sister in the winter, a mere couple of months before. Nobody really knew what happened to her. She was in a group of 5 friends. As the group was walking along the roadside just outside of Taylor, there was a loud thud, and she was gone. Just like that, completely and utterly missing. There was no blood, there was no sounds, nothing. The remaining teens ran in different directions and scattered in pure panic. 2 were found 14 hours later, cut up and bruised, but generally okay. One of the boys was discovered torn to pieces and clearly fed upon. But unfortunately, authorities never located the other boy or Dean's sister. Dean told me of the pain of losing his kid sister, and never really being able to get over it or have any closure or justice. He said his peers silenced him for digging around too much and asking too many questions. Whatever you're planning, you'll need my help. I know this land like the back of my hand. I can show you the likely places of shelter this suspect could be hiding in, he said. That would be a huge help, Dean, but I can't have you with me on this one. The guy's too dangerous. I responded before he cut me short. I understand your concern, but I have to do this. For my sister and the other kids. You'll need me out there. It gets pretty thick, and there's plenty of hollows he could be hiding in. What about the Dogmen? I asked. His face went stone cold white at just the mention of them. That's the tricky part. You see, most of the time we cover the trail, camping areas, but not too deep into the forest. That way people don't go wandering out into the back country never to be seen again. The Dogman seemed to keep back there, save for the odd 1 or 2 younger ones. The rangers like myself are usually long gone before the sun is down, so we rarely cross paths. He replied with his hands sweating as he did so. What do you think they will do when they, or if they encounter Mr. Chambers, the suspect and Werewolf? I added, hoping that the answer would be slaughter him, but instead he replied, I don't know for certain, but I worry that they will see him as a new alpha, then turn on the entire town population overnight. A pure massacre. We have to stop him before he gets to them, he said with a hint of true panic in his voice. I feared you would say that. Then it's settled. We go hunting first light. We raised our drinks and toasted the missing and the dead. The next day around 9 AM we all met in town. A small group of 6 hunters and my ranger friend joined me as we headed out deep into the forest surrounding the town of Taylor. It was pretty thick brush from the get-go as we traversed an incline down into a small hollow. Hogweed everywhere snagging on my backpack and clothing. From 10 minutes into the hike, it was clear that the usual forest ambience was non-existent. Just a quiet howling of wind winding its way through the trees and fissures of the rocks. Around what must have been 2 miles in, and the smell hit my senses like a sledgehammer. Man, this funk was unbearable, and soon making all of our eyes burn and water up. It was literally the worst thing I'd ever smelt. Anyway, a short while later we came upon an old hunting shack. It had long been deserted, and the door half hung on whilst weeds and Spanish moss wound their way through the holes and cracks in the wood. Some of the guys started to look more uneasy as we got closer to the shack. This is the Peters family shack, said Dean. They owned a lot of the land back here for many years, going back to the 1800s, he added. What happened to them? I mean, are there any relatives in town with the rest of you? I asked. No, sir. They all but died out in the 90s, some of old age, others forestry accidents. I believe some of the younger members did move away, over to California, but nobody was really ever sure, Dean replied. I approached the doorway to the shack and pushed the heavy oak door out the way, and it let out a loud creaking noise that any horror movie fan would be proud of. Leaning in and scanning the interior with my flashlight, I could see an old, dusty workbench and a table with 4 chairs, and then a doorway through to what I assumed was the bedroom area was to the far left, off from me. As I scanned my light back to the table area, I noticed off in the opposite corner clothing strewn across the floor. New clothing. I mean, it wasn't dirty or dust covered, it was recently laid there. And then I noticed the scratches all up the walls and floorboards, long and deep, and my heart suddenly skipped a beat as it dawned on me. He was already here. These scratches were fresh. I glanced back at Dean and the others who were watching our 6 and scanning the tree line for any movement. Dean came over and peered in. "Look, man, that clothing is new and so are all those scratches. He's already here," I declared. "Oh my God," responded Dean as he scanned the interior of the shack. "Look there," he suddenly said, pointing to the clothes again. "What?" I asked. "There, look, blood, and lots of it," he replied shakingly. Sure enough, near the pile of torn clothing was a huge puddle of blood, with splatters all up the adjoining walls. "Jeez, man," I reacted aloud, catching the attention of the guys behind us. One by one, the men came over and peered into the shack before staggering back in shock. "Gents, it looks like our man, or whatever he is. Well, he's already arrived, and I'm guessing by the amount of blood that he's already killed something, or... I can't stay out here too late," said one of the younger men, Jerry. My wife, she's heavily pregnant, and I... It's okay, Jerry. We start heading back in a few hours," said Dean, trying to reassure the younger hunter, who by now had lost all colour in his face. "Here, over here, I found something," shouted an old hunter by the name of Rick. He was just off to the side of the shack, a ways to the right. "What do you got, Rick?" asked Dean as we made our way over to where Rick was standing. He was in some chest-high brush kicking around at the ground. "I'm not sure, but it could be a storage cellar. I don't know, though," Rick replied. We got over to where Rick was standing to see an old green steel cover over a wooden hatch. "What the hell?" said Dean at the sight of the strange and heavy cover. "I never knew this was here," he added. "I don't like it. I can't do this. I'm claustrophobic," said Jerry, again looking more and more uneasy by the minute. Crack! A loud noise shattered the silence of the forest. Crack! Another from a closer position. Whatever it was coming this way. "We've got to move now," I said, as we could see the tops of the trees 100 yards, maybe more, start to sway and move. "Open it up," said Dean. "Go, get in now," he added hastily. "What's going on?" I asked him as we struggled to shift the heavy steel cover off the hatch before climbing down into the inky blackness of the shaft, leading to God knows where. As I climbed down, I glanced back over to where the advancing noise was coming from, to see 3 enormous, black as night itself, dogmen spring from the canopy of the trees down to the ground with a tremendous thud. "Oh shit," shouted Dean and 2 other guys who began firing on the creatures as they circled and bared their teeth. "My God, it's true. They do exist," I said in part amazement and part terror. Their enormous build like that of a prime athlete. I mean, muscle upon muscle, clearly defined through their heavy and thick coat of fur. Their hands were extremely disproportionate to the body, with fingers thick and long, tipped with razor-sharp black claws. But most strikingly of all was their bright, glowing red eyes. At night, to witness those eyes staring back at you must have been bone-chilling, to say the least. Before I finally ducked my head below the surface, I see 2 of the dogmen work as a team to separate and corner one of the guys up against the shack as he gradually stepped further and further back into the wrong direction. Then both launched themselves almost in sync from 20, possibly 15 feet away at the guy. He managed to get a few rounds off, but it was useless as their sheer size almost mocked the bullet's impact. Crashing upon him, they began tearing into him like a damn Christmas present. I had seen enough and jumped the remaining steps into the blackness as they pulled the long bits of his intestine out of him whilst he kicked and squealed. Landing a few feet down in some unknown tunnel system, I heard Dean scream out, "No!" before suddenly jumping down onto the ladder and trying to pull the steel door shut. "Jerry, get up here and help him!" I shouted, but Jerry was near catatonic, murmuring to himself low to the ground. "Damn it, kid!" I added before one of the older hunters jumped back onto the ladder and climbed his way back up to where Dean was desperately trying to slide the steel cover shut. The guttural moans and roars of enjoyment from the surface echoed around us and through our bodies. A moment or 2 later, the man's screaming and cries for help suddenly cut out. Dean and the hunter still struggled to fully close the cover, when suddenly long, black fingers clamped around the cover. They were trying to open it back up. "They're trying to get in!" screamed Dean before a long, hairy arm rushed in through the gap and grabbed the hunter by his throat. The look in his face I will never forget. Seconds later, he realised what was happening. "Ah, no!" screamed Dean as he desperately fought against the dogman trying to get in. Pop! Slop! There was a sudden loud popping sound followed by a wet tearing and slop. The hunter's head had been ripped right off of his body. Dean fired his pistol up through the gap, letting off 6 rounds, and the monstrous arm retreated with the head still in its clawed hand. "Go!" shouted the other men as Dean finally managed to slam the steel cover shut with a loud echoing clang, leaving the violent creature scratching and banging and denting against the steel with a tempo of psychotic rage. "Alright, let's keep moving. I don't know if that's going to hold them off or not," I said as I started to make my way down the long and dark tunnel. Old wooden support beams, much like that of a mining operation. It was soon clear to everyone that this wasn't a regular cellar or basement. It stretched on too far, into an unknown maze of shafts and chambers. Old books and crude-made wooden furniture lay around the place, where there were old bottles of whiskey covered in thick layers of dust. The ground beneath our feet was dirt and rocks, and with the same for the walls of the shafts. The faint sound of running water as a small stream flowed between our boots, our steps loud and splashes in the water echoing around us. It was near pitch black, save for a few flashlights. The small, cramped environment was getting to Jerry more and more by the second, but we kept pushing him along with us. That smell. That smell returned as we walked further and further into the maze. The shaft split into 3 separate tunnels, one of which felt like a warm breeze flowed out of. "God, it smells like rotting flesh," one of the guys at the front said. "Shh," said Dean, who was just behind them with myself. Clang. Boom. A faint but definite sound pierced the tunnel from further in. "What?" asked the hunter, but it was already too late as 2 large green eyes revealed themselves behind the hunter. As he turned to speak to Dean, they rose up 3, maybe 4 feet above the hunter as he slowly turned. When he finally turned around and saw what was behind him, a small squeak left his mouth and he dropped his rifle with a loud clatter. Without another second to pass, we all began firing, but it was too late as the huge werewolf slashed at the man's face, literally ripping his face from his skull, and then grabbed him by the arms and slammed him into the sports struts with a catastrophic effect. His whole head simply imploded on impact with the beam. The men started to panic and 2 ran off into the left shaft, leaving me, Jerry and Dean. "We've got to go, and now!" I screamed and threw a flashbang to the creature's feet. As we ran into the far right shaft, he was onto us, but the flashbang went off with an almighty crashing bang, collapsing the shaft above its enormous head and stopping him dead. Well, I hoped, but at least it gave us some time to find out a way out of this maze of tunnels. About an hour later, we came to a large chamber that had been long disused, and a table and a campsite with extra large spit for roasting huge pigs. It appeared like much of this strange place, completely untouched for many, many years. An iron cell was dug into part of the wall, and along the outside there were a few sets of 2-inch thick heavy chains bolted to the ground and walls. I grabbed an old dusty journal from the studying table in the far corner of the chamber. Blowing and wiping the dust off the surface, it had the words, "The Lunar Bloodline." I didn't have time to turn even 1 page before the sound of heavy approaching footfall came rumbling from deep behind us in the tunnel. "Dean, we gotta move." "Where next, Ranger?" I shouted at him. "Your guess is as good as mine," he replied. "Alright then. This way, look, another door. In the corner from the shaft we came through, there was another heavy green steel cover or door, and this time it was almost like the submarine watertight doors. Jerry and Dean tried it. It's jammed! I seized up. The thumping footfall was getting closer and closer and louder, and now was accompanied with a low growling, bellowing from within the inky darkness of the tunnel. I shone my flashlight into the tunnel towards the oncoming threat, and a faint set of green eyes were glowing back at me, bobbing up and down, up and down. Then, again, they rose high to nearly the roof of the tunnel. I noticed not only that, but the god-awful smell was back, and then the rhythm of the footfall changed. It was now clearly running bipedal as thud, thud, thud boomed down towards our location. "We gotta go, guys, come on! The door, damn it!" I screamed, and the werewolf responded with a roar that was so sinister, it made me shudder. "Move, Jerry!" I said as I pushed him out of the way. "Keep your eyes on that son of a bitch!" Trying the heavy handle once more with Dean, we heaved until it finally gave with a loud metal clank. "Quick, inside! Now, Jerry!" I said as Jerry stood frozen in place, his skinny, denim-covered legs shaking as a stream of piss ran out from the bottom of his trouser leg into the dirt. A deep and low came from the tunnel in front of Jerry. "Dean, grab the kid, let's go! Come on, kid! Come on!" screamed Dean. He literally had to grab the kid and throw him into the open door. As he did, the monstrous werewolf emerged from the dark tunnel, now fully standing in front of us, cast in the strange light that our flashlights lay upon him. He showed his massive teeth, and with an almost human smile, he was enjoying this. I could see it in his green, evil eyes. Myself and Dean soon jumped in behind Jerry and rushed to close the steel door. We only just managed it by a fraction of a second as he slammed into the metal door, denting it immediately. The beast even managed to punch through the 3-inch thick safety glass above the locks and began trying to open it back up. "Shoot him!" we screamed at the same time as his enormous hairy arm flowered around at the door, again our bullets seemingly pinging off of his thick skin. But eventually he retreated once more, but not before doing, I swear, the creepiest thing I have ever seen, ever witnessed. He just stopped banging and clawing and then leaned down, close to the cracked hole of glass that he had just smashed through. He leaned in and just stared at me. Just me. He didn't seem to care for the other two. No, he knew I was here for him. And boy oh boy, was he pissed. We locked eyes for what felt like hours, and then Dean tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Let's get going, I found a passage." I kept my eyes locked with Bill Chambers, and then nodded and tipped my hat. "I'll be seeing you soon, Bill." The beast snarled, once again showing those teeth. Up close, I could see the long scar, still evident on his right cheek, although now it stretched along his nasty, gnarly muzzle. He also had 4 long-ass canines that protruded from the maw, each side 2 up and 2 down. His breath reeked of decay and blood, no doubt from the fresh killing and murders that he had just committed. I got up and left following Dean and Jerry down another tunnel. As we did so, we could hear the werewolf stomping away from the door back into the black darkness. "This way," said Dean, grabbing Jerry by his collar of his shirt and moving him down the tunnel in front. Eventually, about 25 minutes later, we found an access ladder to the surface. Where it would lead us out to, I hadn't a clue. Plus, as we hit the surface, it was clearly still way deep into the forest. And worse still, it was getting late and sundown would be creeping in soon. And at a guess, we had 2 hours tops until the golden hour. Shit. "We can't go strolling through the woods like it's a nice summer's evening," said Jerry, as he too realised the predicament we were now in. "Well, we can't stay down here with him, and I'm running low on ammo. I got 2 more grenades and 1 more flashbang, and then we're out," I replied. So this was the cards that we were dealt. Lost miles out in the Dogman-infested forest, sundown fast on our arse, and a damn psychotic, murdering werewolf hunting us down with apparently an obsession for myself. "You see that high ground up there?" said Dean, pointing to a cliff edge about a 1/4 mile away. "Yeah, I see it," I responded questionably. "We need to get up to that point so we can possibly see where the town is from here, or at least gather our possible location," responded Dean. "That's a great idea, buddy. I don't think we have any other better option. Let's do it." "But guys, wait," said young Jerry, looking absolutely terrified. "But nothing, kid," I said. "It's either or, and I know you don't like dark, cramped spaces. Think of all that fresh air you could get up there. It's our best shot. Hell, our only shot," I added. With an unsure nod of his pale face, we gathered ourselves and made for the surface, for that cliff. God knows our nerves were on end, and the ambience and atmosphere was electric. 2 hours tops to sundown. 2 hours until they come hunting for us. Wow, hope you guys enjoyed that next chapter. Of course, as ever, please do let me know down below in the comments. Thank you ever so much for your feedback on the last chapter. Really touched and appreciate it. Some great ideas as well being thrown out there. As ever, please do share and don't forget to hashtag Team Fear. And if you haven't subscribed to DMT, smash the subscribe button and throat punch the notification bell to stay up to date with all DMT content. And remember guys, if you're going out to the back country, into a little town for some hunting or camping, best keep your wits about you and your eyes and ears open. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.